They gave me 20 minutes to pack 8 years of my life into a cardboard box.
She lost her job days before Christmas. Then the billionaire CEO froze when he saw the baby she was carrying. 4 days before Christmas, a young mother walked out of a skyscraper with a cardboard box, a 3-month-old baby strapped to her chest, and no idea her billionaire ex was watching from above. Before we get into this story, I want to take a moment to thank every single one of you who keeps coming back to this channel. And to those of you who've hit that subscribe button, thank you for helping. Mr. Steele Rich Stories crossed 3,500 subscribers. That number isn't just a milestone, it's proof that we're building a community that doesn't turn its back on people when things get hard. We tell stories about real human struggle, about what happens when life doesn't go according to plan, and about the choices we make when everything falls apart. Now, I need you to do something for me right now. I need you to share this video. Share it with someone who feels like life just pulled the rug out from under them. Share it with the person who got blindsided at the worst possible moment. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a reminder that sometimes the worst moments become the turning points that change everything. Here's what I want you to think about. Have you ever been fired, laid off, let go? And not just at any time, but at the absolute worst time. Right when the bills are piling up, right when you just had a baby, right when you thought you finally had some stability. That moment when someone in a suit tells you the company is going in a different direction and hands you a severance check that won't even cover next month's rent. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about how companies treat people like numbers on a spreadsheet, especially new mothers who took a chance on coming back to work. We're talking about the kind of pain that's invisible to the people sitting in corner offices, the people making decisions about who stays and who goes without ever looking them in the eye. By the end of this story, you're going to see how one layoff, one name on a list, changed a billionaire, changed a company, and changed a family. And if you've ever been knocked down, ever felt like the world moved on without you, this story is going to be different. Let's go back to that December afternoon. Kendra Porter had been back at her desk for less than 5 minutes when she saw it. The box. Standard issue, the kind with reinforced corners that every corporation keeps stacked in storage closets for moments exactly like this. It sat on her desk, empty and waiting, next to her keyboard. Her nameplate, the small stand that read Kendra Porter, Financial Analyst, was already gone. She stood frozen in the doorway of her cubicle, her daughter Aria asleep in the carrier strapped across her chest. The baby's weight pressed warm against her ribs, a constant reminder of why she'd come back to this job. 3 weeks ago, instead of taking the full 12 weeks of unpaid leave she couldn't afford anyway, Kendra's hands went numb. She'd only stepped away for 20 minutes. 20 minutes to take Aria to the small nursing room on the 3rd floor to change her diaper, to walk the hallway bouncing and shushing because the baby had been fussy all morning. 20 minutes, and when she came back, her entire professional life had been reduced to a container with her name on it. Kendra. The voice came from behind her. Priscilla Gant, the HR director, stood in the hallway with a manila folder, tucked under one arm, and an expression that Kendra had seen before. On doctors delivering bad news, on landlords raising rent, on people who were about to upend your life and then go home and sleep just fine. Can we talk in conference room B? It wasn't a question. Kendra followed her down the narrow corridor, past cubicles where her co-workers suddenly became very interested in their computer screens. No one met her eyes. They all knew. Of course they knew. In an office this size, news traveled faster than email. Conference room B was small, windowless, and smelled like reheated coffee and dry erase markers. Priscilla closed the door and gestured to a chair. Kendra sat, adjusting Aria's carrier so the baby wouldn't wake. "I'm going to be direct with you," Priscilla said, settling into the chair across from her. She opened the folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "The company is undergoing a restructuring. We're realigning our financial analysis department to better reflect current market conditions and operational efficiency." Kendra stared at the paper. The words blurred. "What does that mean?" "It means your position is being eliminated. Effective today. The room tilted. Kendra gripped the edge of the table. Today, 4 days before Christmas. Priscilla's expression didn't change. The timing is unfortunate, but these decisions are driven by fiscal quarter deadlines. You'll receive 2 weeks of severance pay, and your benefits will continue through the end of the month. If you have any personal items at your desk, you're welcome to collect them now. Security will escort you out of the building. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pay to cover rent, formula, diapers, utilities, student, loans, and the medical bills still coming in from Arya's birth. 2 weeks to figure out how to survive in one of the most expensive cities in the country as a single mother with no family nearby and no backup plan. Kendra's throat tightened. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to ask how they could do this to someone who'd just come back from maternity leave, who was still figuring out how to pump breast milk in a storage closet and answer emails at the same time, who had barely slept 3 hours a night for 3 months straight. Instead, she asked, "Why me?" Priscilla folded her hands on the table. "It's not personal, Kendra. It's a business decision. The company has to make difficult choices to remain competitive. Not personal." Kendra almost laughed. What could be more personal than losing the income that kept your baby fed and your lights on? She signed the paper. What else was she supposed to do? Fight. Beg. She had no leverage, no union, no safety net. She was a single line on a budget report, a cost that someone upstairs had decided they could cut. "Thank you for your time with the company," Priscilla said, standing. "I'll walk you back to your desk. I can find my own way." Kendra left the conference room with her head up and her jaw tight, Arya still sleeping against her chest. She walked back to her cubicle, past the averted gazes and the hushed voices, and started packing. Coffee mug with a chipped handle, a small potted succulent that had somehow survived 3 weeks of neglect, a framed photo from years ago, taken during happier times. She wrapped each item in the scarf she kept in her desk drawer and placed them carefully into the container. Behind the frame, wedged against the backing, was a magazine page she'd torn out years ago. She'd forgotten it was there. The headline read, "Keaton Vale, the Reluctant Tycoon." Below it, a photo of a man in a tailored suit standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows, his expression serious and unreadable. The article was from a business magazine, one of those glossy profiles that made billionaires seem like misunderstood geniuses instead of people who'd made calculated decisions to accumulate wealth. Keaton Vale. Kendra stared at the photo, and for a moment, she was 22 again, sitting across from him in a cramped diner booth, laughing about something she couldn't even remember now. Back when he was just Keaton, before the empire, before the headlines, before he became someone she only saw in articles and annual reports. The cruelty of it hit her all over again. She worked for his company. She'd been working for his company for 3 months, ever since she'd taken this job out of desperation when Arya was born. And now his company, his restructuring, his realignment, his business decision, was throwing her out 4 days before Christmas. He had no idea she was here, no idea she existed in his world again. And even if he did, would it matter? She folded the magazine page and slipped it into her coat pocket. Kendra. Reina Lopez stood at the edge of the cubicle, her arms crossed, her face tight with anger. Reina worked 2 desks over and had been one of the few people who actually helped Kendra navigate her first weeks back after Arya was born, showing her where the nursing room was, covering for her when she had to leave early for a pediatrician appointment. "I can't believe they did this to you," Reina said. "Believe it. It's not right. You just got back. You've been busting your tail trying to keep up, and they just..." She shook her head. "Don't blame yourself, okay? This isn't on you." Kendra nodded, not trusting herself to speak. If she opened her mouth, she'd cry, and she refused to give this place her tears. She finished packing. The container wasn't even full. Reina gave her a quick, fierce hug. "Call me if you need anything. I mean it. Thanks." Kendra picked up her belongings and walked to the elevator. Arya stirred, making a small sound against her chest but didn't wake. The elevator doors opened, and Kendra stepped inside. She pressed the button for the ground floor. As the elevator descended, Kendra let herself think about what she'd imagined her life would look like at 30. Not this. Not standing in an elevator with a container of office supplies and a 3-month-old. Wondering how she was going to pay rent next month. Not getting laid off from a job she didn't even like. In a city that chewed people up and spit them out without a second thought. Not raising a baby alone because the father had bailed the second he saw the positive pregnancy test. The elevator dinged. Ground floor. The lobby was decorated for Christmas. A massive tree stood in the center, draped in gold and silver ornaments, surrounded by fake presents wrapped in shiny paper. Garlands hung from the ceiling. A loop of instrumental holiday music played softly through hidden speakers. Everything about it felt like a mockery. Kendra walked past the security desk. Darren Cole, the guard who usually nodded at her in the mornings, looked up in surprise. "Heading out already?" he asked. Something like that. He glanced at her belongings. Understanding crossed his face, and his expression softened. "Take care of yourself, Miss Porter. You too, Darren." She pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the cold December afternoon. The wind bit at her face. She adjusted the carrier, making sure Aria was covered, and started walking toward the subway station. She didn't look back. She didn't see the man standing on the mezzanine above the lobby, holding a coffee. That had gone cold in his hand, staring down at the spot where she'd just been. Keaton Vale had built an empire, but standing on the mezzanine overlooking the lobby of his own building, he felt like he owned nothing that mattered. He'd come down from his office on the 42nd floor to clear his head. The meeting with his CFO, Trent Hollis, had run long and left him restless. They'd gone over the restructuring plan for the 3rd time that week, department by department, position by position, names and numbers on spreadsheets that represented people's livelihoods. Keaton had signed off on it. He always did. That was the job. Make the hard calls, keep the company profitable, protect the bottom line. But today, something felt off. He'd grown up poor. Not the kind of poor that people talked about in think pieces or campaign speeches, the real kind. The kind where you wore the same pair of shoes until the soles fell off, where you ate cereal for dinner. Because that's all there was, where the electricity got shut off and you did your homework by candlelight. He'd promised himself, back when he was a kid sitting in the dark, that if he ever made it, if he ever had enough, he'd take care of people. He'd be the kind of boss who didn't treat employees like disposable parts. Somewhere along the way, that promise had gotten buried under quarterly earnings reports and shareholder expectations. The meeting this morning had been the final approval for the layoffs. Trent had walked him through the list one more time. 12 positions across 3 departments. Financial analysis, operations, client services. All of them necessary cuts, Trent had assured him. All of them are justified by the numbers. Keaton had scanned the list, and then he'd seen it. Kendra Porter, financial analyst. His pen had hovered over the page. Porter. It was a common enough name. Could be anyone. It was probably anyone. But for just a second, his mind had gone back 8 years, to a different life, to a woman he'd walked away from because he'd been too afraid to let anyone see how broken he still was. He'd pushed the thought down and signed the page. "I'll review the severance packages later this week," he'd told Trent. Understood. Now, standing in the lobby with a coffee he didn't remember buying, Keaton watched the holiday decorations glitter under the lobby lights and felt the weight of every decision he'd ever made pressing down on him. That's when he saw her. A woman walking toward the exit, container in her arms, a baby carrier strapped to her chest. He couldn't see her face clearly from this angle, just her profile, the shape of her jaw, the way she held her shoulders, the particular way she walked, like she was carrying something heavier than what was in her hands. His chest tightened. He knew that walk. The woman pushed through the revolving doors and disappeared into the street. Keaton's pulse hammered in his ears. He moved to the railing, leaning over, trying to catch another glimpse, but she was already gone. It couldn't be. He pulled out his phone and opened his email, scrolling fast until he found the restructuring list Trent had sent him last week. He pulled up the attachment and scanned the names. Kendra Porter, financial analyst, start date, September, status, active, termination effective, December 21st. His stomach dropped. He opened the employee directory and searched her name. A photo loaded on the screen. It was her, older, tired. Hair is different, but unmistakably her. Kendra Porter, who he'd loved when he was 25 and stupid and too scared to let anyone in. Kendra, who he'd left without explanation because he didn't know how to be loved when he still hated himself. Kendra, who'd worked in his building for 3 months, and he'd never known. Kendra, who he'd just fired, with a baby. The coffee cup slipped from his hand and hit the floor, splashing cold liquid across the tile. Keaton ran for the elevator, jabbing the button over and over, heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack through his ribs. The doors opened. He stepped inside and punched the button for the ground floor, even though he was already on the mezzanine, just 1 level up. He couldn't think straight, couldn't breathe. The elevator descended. The doors opened. He sprinted across the lobby, past Darren at the security desk, through the revolving doors, out into the cold. He looked left, right, scanning the crowd of pedestrians bundled in coats and scarves, searching for a woman with her belongings and a baby. She was gone. If this story has already hooked you, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because what happens next, when the past catches up with the present, and a billionaire has to face the consequences of a decision he didn't even know he was making, is going to change everything. Stay with me. To understand why Keaton Vale stood on a cold December street, desperately searching for a woman he hadn't seen in 8 years, you need to go back to the beginning. Back to when he wasn't a billionaire. Back when success was just a dream he carried in a beat-up laptop bag, and Kendra Porter was the only person who believed in it as much as he did. It was a Tuesday in March, 8 years ago, when Kendra Porter walked into a coffee shop for a freelance meeting that would change her life. She was 24, barely making rent, and juggling 3 different contract jobs to keep herself afloat. Her college degree in marketing had promised stability and career growth. What she got instead was an endless stream of unpaid internships, low-paying gigs, and the constant hustle of trying to prove she was worth more than minimum wage. The client was late. Kendra sat at a corner table with her laptop open, reviewing the proposal she'd spent all night putting together. This was her pitch for rebranding a startup, some tech thing she didn't fully understand, but had researched enough to fake competence. The founder had contacted her through a mutual friend and said he needed someone creative who could work fast and cheap. Cheap, that was the word that always came up. The door opened, and a man walked in carrying a backpack that looked like it had survived a war. He was tall, with dark hair that needed a cut, and eyes that scanned the room like he was calculating odds. When those eyes landed on her, he smiled, and something about that smile made her forget she'd been annoyed about waiting. "Kendra Porter?" he asked, walking over. "That's me. You must be Keaton Vale." "Sorry I'm late. The train got delayed, and I had a call with an investor that ran over." He dropped into the chair across from her, setting the backpack on the floor. "Thanks for meeting me. I know my budget is embarrassing, but I promise this project is going somewhere." She'd heard that before. Every broke entrepreneur said their idea was going to change the world. Most of them were wrong, but there was something different about Keaton Vale. Maybe it was the way he talked about his vision. Not like he was selling her, but like he was inviting her into something bigger. Maybe it was the exhaustion in his face, the kind that came from working 20-hour days because you believed in something so hard you couldn't stop. Or maybe it was the way he listened when she spoke, like her opinions actually mattered. They spent 2 hours in that coffee shop, going over branding strategies, target audiences, and marketing angles. By the time they left, Kendra had agreed to take the job for half her usual rate. And Keaton had convinced her to meet him again the next week to keep building. That second meeting turned into a third, then a fourth. Somewhere around the 5th meeting, it stopped being just business. Keaton worked out of his apartment, a cramped 1-bedroom in a neighborhood that gentrification hadn't reached yet. The walls were thin, the heating barely worked, and the whole place smelled faintly of the restaurant downstairs. But it was his, and he'd turned the living room into an office. Desk cobbled together from sawhorses, and a door, whiteboard covered in diagrams and timelines, stacks of notebooks filled with ideas. Kendra started showing up there instead of coffee shops. It was easier, he said. Fewer distractions, better Wi-Fi. They worked on the floor, laptops open, papers spread out around them, cheap. Takeout containers balanced on whatever flat surface they could find. Chinese food on Mondays, pizza on Thursdays, Thai when they'd had a good week and could splurge. Keaton talked about his company the way some people talked about religion. He wanted to build something that would help small businesses compete with corporations, that would level the playing field, that would prove you didn't need a trust fund to succeed. He wanted to take care of people the way no one had ever taken care of him. And Kendra, who'd spent years feeling like she was invisible in a city full of people chasing the same dreams, felt seen. One night, after they'd been working for 6 hours straight, Keaton leaned back against the couch and rubbed his eyes. "You ever think about what you'd do if money wasn't an issue?" he asked. "All the time," Kendra said. "I'd travel, see places I've only read about, maybe get a dog, definitely get an apartment with a kitchen that has more than 2 burners." He laughed. "That's the dream. 2 burners. What about you?" Keaton was quiet for a moment, staring at the ceiling. "I'd make sure my mom never had to worry about money again," he said. "She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed when I was a kid, counted pennies at the kitchen table every night, trying to figure out which bills she could pay and which ones she'd have to skip. I used to watch her do that and promise myself that one day I'd make enough that she'd never have to count pennies again." Kendra's chest tightened. She'd seen her own mother do the same thing. "Where is she now?" she asked. "Still in the same town, still working too hard. I send her money when I can, but she won't take much. Says, I need to focus on building my future." He shook his head. "I'm trying to build hers too, but she's stubborn. Sounds like someone else I know." He looked at her, and the air between them shifted. It was one of those moments where you both know something's about to change, and you either step forward or step back. Keaton stepped forward. He kissed her, soft and tentative, like he was asking a question. Kendra answered by kissing him back, and the world narrowed to just the 2 of them on the floor of that cramped apartment, surrounded by business plans and takeout containers, and the beginning of something that felt like hope. For a while, it was perfect. They became a team. Kendra handled the branding, the messaging, the way Keaton's vision would be presented to the world. Keaton handled the product, the strategy, the endless meetings with potential investors, who wanted to see proof that someone from nowhere could build something worth betting on. They worked long hours, but they worked together. They celebrated small wins, a new client, a successful pitch, a press mention in a local business blog. They took walks on Sundays, the only day Keaton allowed himself to step away from work. It was on one of those walks that a friend traveling with them snapped a photo at sunset, one Kendra would keep for years. Keaton talked about the future, like it was something they were building together. He'd say things like, "When this takes off, we'll get you on payroll full-time. And once we raise the next round, we're getting an actual office, and you're picking the furniture." Kendra let herself believe in that future. She let herself believe in him. But success has a way of changing people. It started small. A missed dinner because an investor call ran late. A cancelled weekend plan because a potential partnership needed immediate attention. Keaton started traveling more, back and forth between cities, always chasing the next deal, the next opportunity, the next step toward making his dream real. Kendra understood. She did. She knew how hard he was working, how much pressure he was under, how much he'd sacrificed to get this far. But understanding didn't make the loneliness hurt less. She'd sit in his apartment, working on campaigns for a company that was growing faster than she'd ever expected, and wonder when she'd become background noise in his life. The worst part was that he didn't even notice. Or if he did, he didn't say anything. One night, she'd planned a dinner for his birthday. Nothing fancy, just homemade pasta, a bottle of wine she'd saved up for, and a cake from the bakery down the street. She'd set it all up in his apartment, candles lit, music playing softly. He texted her at 7, stuck in a meeting. Don't wait up. At 9, she blew out the candles. At 11, she went home. He apologized the next day, of course. Send flowers. Said he'd make it up to her. But the flowers wilted, and the makeup date got rescheduled twice before it. Finally happened, and even then, he spent half of it checking his phone. Kendra started pulling back, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. She couldn't keep giving everything to someone who only had space for her in the margins. The final night came in late spring. Keaton had just closed his first major funding round, $2 million from a venture capital firm that believed in his vision. It was the validation he'd been working toward for years, the proof that he could build something real. Kendra was proud of him. She was, but she was also exhausted. She showed up at his apartment with Chinese food and a bottle of cheap champagne, expecting to celebrate. Instead, she found him on the phone, pacing the living room, talking to someone about expansion plans and hiring timelines. He mouthed sorry and held up a finger. Just one more minute. That minute turned into 20. When he finally hung up, he looked at her like he'd forgotten she was there. "Hey," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry about that. Things are crazy right now." "They're always crazy, Keaton." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been sitting here for 20 minutes waiting for you to finish a call that could have waited until tomorrow. It means I can't remember the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about your company. It means I feel like I'm dating a ghost." "That's not fair," he said. "You know how important this is. You know what I'm trying to build." "I do. I've been helping you build it. But where do I fit in all of this, Keaton? Because lately, it feels like I'm just another task on your to-do list." He didn't answer right away, and that silence told her everything. "I care about you," he said finally. "You know I do, but not enough." "That's not—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I can't be the boyfriend you deserve and build this at the same time. I don't have the capacity. Every part of me is going into making this work, and I don't have anything left over." "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we need to take a step back. Give each other some space. I need to stay focused, and you deserve someone who can actually be present." "Don't do that," she said, her voice shaking. "Don't pretend this is for my benefit. If you want to end this, just say it. I don't want to end it. I just—" He looked at her, and for the first time in months, she saw something real in his eyes. Fear. "I don't know how to do this, Kendra. I don't know how to need someone, and still be the person I have to be to make this work. You think needing people makes you weak. I think needing people means they can leave. And I can't." His voice cracked. "I can't survive that right now." Kendra walked over to him, took his face in her hands, and kissed him. Not the soft, tentative kiss from their first night, but something desperate and aching and final. "You're going to regret this," she whispered against his mouth. "I know." They spent that night together, tangled up in each other, like they could stop the inevitable if they just held on tight enough. But when Kendra woke up in the morning, Keaton was already dressed, already pulling away. "I have a meeting," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Of course you do." She left his apartment that morning and didn't look back. Didn't text, didn't call. She deleted his number, unfollowed him on social media, and buried herself. In work, trying to forget the man who'd chosen his dream over her. 6 weeks later, Kendra Porter woke up nauseous for the 8th day in a row. She told herself it was stress, bad takeout, a stomach bug going around. Anything but the truth her body was trying to tell her. But when her period didn't come, she bought a pregnancy test from a drugstore 3 blocks from her apartment, took it home, and locked herself in the bathroom. 2 lines. Positive. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the test, her mind racing through every possible option and outcome. She was pregnant. With Keaton Vale's baby. Keaton Vale, who'd just closed a $2 million funding round. Keaton Vale, whose face was starting to show up in business articles with headlines, like the next tech visionary and from broke to breaking through, Keaton Vale, who'd walked away from her because he couldn't handle needing someone. Kendra picked up her phone. She pulled up his contact. She'd deleted the number, but she still knew it by heart. Her thumb hovered over the call button. What would she even say? "Hey, I know you said you need to focus on your company, but surprise, you're going to be a father." She could already hear his response. The shock, the scramble to figure out logistics. Maybe he'd offer money. Maybe he'd try to be involved. Or maybe, and this was the fear that made her hands shake, maybe he'd think she was trying to trap him, trying to cash in on his success, trying to derail everything he'd worked for. She couldn't do it. She couldn't be the woman who called a rising billionaire with news of a pregnancy and have the whole world think she'd done it on purpose. She couldn't give him one more reason to see relationships as liabilities. And maybe, somewhere deep down, she was still hurt enough to want him to wonder what happened to her, to realize one day that he'd thrown away something real. Kendra put the phone down. She would do this alone. The months that followed were the hardest of Kendra Porter's life. She kept working freelance gigs as long as she could, hiding her growing belly under loose shirts and taking video calls from angles that didn't show her midsection. She budgeted every dollar: prenatal vitamins, doctor visits, baby supplies, bought second-hand from thrift stores and online marketplaces. She didn't tell anyone who the father was. When friends asked, she gave vague answers about a relationship that didn't work out, and most people were polite enough not to push. Meanwhile, Keaton Vale's face kept showing up in her newsfeed. Another funding round, a major partnership, a profile in a national business magazine. She read every article, hating herself for it, but unable to stop. In one interview, the reporter asked him about work-life balance. "I don't really have a personal life right now," Keaton had said, laughing. "It's all work, but that's the sacrifice you make when you're building something from the ground up. You can't do this halfway." Kendra closed her laptop and cried. When Aria was born in September, 3 weeks early, and screaming her lungs out, Kendra held her daughter and made a promise she would give this little girl everything. Stability, safety, love, all the things she and Keaton had both grown up without. She went back to work as soon as she could, taking the first stable job offer she got, financial analyst at a mid-sized firm. The pay was decent. The benefits covered healthcare. It wasn't her dream job, but dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. It wasn't until she'd been there for 2 weeks that she noticed the parent company name on her paycheck stub, Vale Enterprises. She'd been working for Keaton Vale's company the entire time, and he had no idea. Kendra Porter stood on the sidewalk outside the building, the cold December air biting. At her face, Aria asleep against her chest, her belongings growing heavy in her arms. She needed to move. I needed to get to the subway, get home, figure out her next step. But her feet wouldn't cooperate. Behind her, the glass doors of the building swung open. Kendra. The voice hit her like a physical blow. She knew that voice. Would know it anywhere, even after 8 years of silence. Her whole body tensed. For a moment, she considered pretending she hadn't heard, considered walking away, disappearing into the crowd, letting him wonder if it had really been her. But Aria shifted against her chest. And Kendra remembered she wasn't just Kendra Porter anymore. She was someone's mother, and mothers didn't run. Slowly, she turned around. Keaton Vale stood on the sidewalk, breathing hard like he'd been running, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked older, sharper, successful. He looked exactly like the man she'd loved and exactly like a stranger. Their eyes met, and the world stopped. Kendra Porter turned around slowly, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it from 10 feet away. Keaton Vale stood on the sidewalk outside his own building, chest heaving like he'd just sprinted down 42 flights of stairs. His suit jacket hung open, his tie was crooked, and his hair, always so carefully styled in those business magazine photos, stuck up at odd angles where he'd been running his hands through it. He looked exactly like the man she'd loved 8 years ago, and nothing like him at all. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just stared at each other across the stretch of cold concrete, the city moving around them, taxis honking, people rushing past with shopping bags, the distant sound of someone playing saxophone for change. "Kendra," Keaton said again, softer this time, like he needed to confirm she was real. Keaton. His name felt strange in her mouth after so many years of not saying it out loud. She'd thought about it plenty of times, whispered it in anger during sleepless nights with a colicky newborn, saw it in headlines and news alerts, typed it into search engines when she was feeling particularly self-destructive. But saying it to his face was different. "I saw you in the lobby," he said, taking a step closer. "I saw what you were carrying and I wasn't sure it was you, but then I checked the employee directory and you realized you just fired me," Kendra finished. "Congratulations. Very efficient." He flinched. "I didn't know you worked here. I swear I didn't know. Would it have mattered if you did?" The question hung between them, and Keaton didn't answer because they both knew the truth. Maybe it would have. Maybe it wouldn't have, but either way, she was standing here with her belongings and no job 4 days before Christmas. That's when his eyes dropped to the baby carrier strapped across her chest. Kendra watched his expression change, confusion giving way to curiosity, curiosity sharpening into focus. Arya had turned her head slightly in her sleep, her tiny face visible now, one small hand curled near her mouth. Keaton went very still. "You have a baby," he said quietly. "Yes." "How old?" 3 months. She watched him do the math in his head, watched the color drain from his face as the timeline clicked into place. But he didn't ask the question yet. He just stared at Arya like he was trying to memorize every detail. The curve of her cheeks, the dark wisps of hair sticking out from under her knit hat, the shape of her tiny nose. And then Arya yawned, her eyes fluttering open for just a second before closing again. Hazel eyes with gold flecks that caught the winter light. The exact same eyes Keaton Vale saw in the mirror every morning. The world seemed to narrow down to just the 3 of them standing on that sidewalk. Traffic noise faded. The cold didn't feel as sharp. Everything else became background. "Is she?" Keaton started, his voice breaking. He stopped, swallowed hard, and tried again. "Is she mine?" Kendra could have lied, could have told him no, could have protected both of them from whatever came next. But looking at him, at the raw hope and terror warring on his face, she couldn't do it. "Yes," she said. "Her name is Arya. Arya Porter. And she's yours." Keaton staggered backward like she'd physically shoved him. He braced one hand against the building's facade, his breath coming fast and shallow. 3 months, he repeated. 3 months old. That means, how long have you known? Since the beginning. I found out I was pregnant 6 weeks after you ended things. 6 weeks. He looked at her, eyes wide with disbelief. You've known for almost a year that I have a daughter, and you didn't tell me. The anger in his voice sparked her own. Don't you dare, Kendra said, her voice low and fierce. Don't you dare stand there and act like I'm the one who did something wrong. You ended things, Keaton. You looked me in the eye and said you couldn't be the boyfriend I deserved because you needed to stay focused on building your empire. You made it crystal clear that relationships were a distraction you couldn't afford. That's not. You're right. It's not fair to summarize 8 years in one sentence. So let me be more specific. She shifted Arya's weight, the baby stirring slightly but not waking. You cancelled our plans so many times I stopped making them. You missed my birthday. You forgot we had dinner reservations and left me sitting alone at a restaurant for 2 hours. And when I finally told you I couldn't keep doing it, you said, and I quote, I don't have the capacity to need someone right now. Keaton closed his eyes. I remember. So when I found out I was pregnant, I sat in my bathroom with a positive test in my hand and thought about calling you. I really did. I pulled up your number and almost hit the dial a dozen times. Why didn't you? Because I was terrified, Kendra said, her voice cracking. Terrified you'd think I was trying to trap you. Terrified you'd offer me money to make the problem go away. terrified you'd try to do the right thing and end up resenting me and this baby for ruining your life. And honestly, I was still hurt enough that part of me wanted you to wonder. I wanted you to wake up one day and realize you'd thrown away something real. Keaton's jaw worked like he was trying to find words and failing. I have a daughter, he said finally, more to himself than to her. I have a 3-month-old daughter, and I missed everything. The pregnancy, the birth, her first, God, I don't even know what milestones I've missed. Her first smile was at 6 weeks, Kendra heard herself say. She likes being sung to when she's fussy. She hates having her diaper changed. She makes this little grunt when she's about to wake up from a nap. Keaton's eyes filled with tears. He didn't bother to hide. I should have been there for all of that. Yes, you should have. The admission hung between them. Then Keaton's expression shifted, hardening into something that looked like resolve. You said you just got fired. Laid off, Kendra corrected. Restructuring. Your HR director was very clear that it wasn't personal, just a business decision. From my company, from Vale Enterprises, yes. I've been working there for 3 months. Financial analyst, not my dream job, but it paid the bills and had health insurance, which matters when you have a baby. Keaton looked like he might be sick. I signed those termination papers this morning, he said. I saw your name on the list. Kendra's stomach dropped. You saw my name? I didn't know it was you. Porter is a common name. But I saw Kendra Porter, and something about it felt. I paused. I told myself I'd circle back to it, double-check the details. And then I got distracted by another meeting, and I signed the paperwork anyway. Of course you did. That's not fair, isn't it? Kendra shifted Aria again, the weight of the baby and her belongings making her arms ache. You just admitted you saw my name, felt something off about it, and signed away my job anyway because you had another meeting. That's exactly what I meant 8 years ago, when I said you always put work first. I know, Keaton said quietly. You're right. You were right then, and you're right now, and I don't have an excuse. The admission took some of the wind out of Kendra's anger. She'd expected defensiveness, justifications, the kind of corporate doublespeak she'd gotten from Priscilla Gant. She hadn't expected honesty. It's not just me, she said after a moment. There were 12 people on that list. 12 people are going home tonight trying to figure out how to pay rent, how to tell their families, and how to survive. You probably don't even know their names. Keaton's silence was answer enough. That's the problem with building an empire, Kendra continued. You get so high up that you stop seeing the people at the bottom. You make decisions on paper, and you don't have to watch someone pack their desk or see their kids go without Christmas presents because their parents just lost their income 4 days before the holiday. You're right. Stop saying that. What do you want me to say? Keaton asked, his voice rising. That I'm a terrible person? That I've lost track of what matters? That I built exactly what I said I wanted to build, and somewhere along the way forgot why I was building it in the first place? Fine, it's all true. I signed those termination papers without thinking about the actual human beings behind the names. I ended things with you because I was too scared to let anyone get close enough to hurt me. I missed the birth of my daughter because I was too proud and too stupid to realize that success doesn't mean anything if you're alone. He ran both hands through his hair, making it stick up even worse. I can't defend any of it, he said. I can't stand here and tell you I did the right thing, because I didn't. I made choices that hurt people, and one of those people is standing right in front of me, holding our daughter. Kendra blinked hard against the sudden burn in her eyes. It only matters to you now because it's me, she said. Because Aria has your eyes. What about everyone else who got let go today? What about the single dad on the operations team, or the woman in client services who just bought a house? Do they matter, or is it just the ones who have a personal connection to you? The question landed like a punch. Keaton opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know, he admitted. I should say yes, they all matter, and I mean that, but you're right. That seeing you made it real in a way the names on paper didn't. And that's on me. That's something I have to fix. How? Kendra challenged. Are you going to personally apologize to every person you've ever laid off? Going to change your entire corporate structure overnight? Or are you just going to feel bad for a few days and then go back to business as usual? I don't know, Keaton said again, but I want to try. I want to. He looked at Arya, his expression softening. Would you let me? He reached out one hand, then pulled it back, uncertain. I just want to see her up close, he said quietly. Please. Kendra's instinct was to say no, to protect her daughter from a man who'd already proven he knew how to walk away. But she saw the desperation in his face, the way his hand trembled slightly, the tears still caught in his eyelashes. She's sleeping, Kendra said. Don't wake her. Keaton stepped closer, moving slowly like he was approaching something precious and breakable. He leaned down, getting his first real look at his daughter's face. Arya slept on, oblivious to the storm happening around her. Her little mouth moved slightly, her hand twitching. She was so small, so perfect, so completely unaware that her father was seeing her for the first time. She's beautiful, Keaton whispered. She looks like my mother. Same nose. Kendra hadn't noticed that, but now that he said it, she could see it. The resemblance to the woman in the old photos Keaton had shown her years ago, back when they were building something together. Keaton straightened up, wiping at his eyes roughly. I know I don't deserve it, he said. I know I have no right to ask, but can we talk? Properly, somewhere warm, somewhere you can sit down and not hold all that weight. I need to understand. I need to know everything I missed, and I need to apologize in a way that actually means something, not just standing on a freezing sidewalk. Kendra looked at him, really looked. She saw the successful billionaire that the world knew, but she also saw the scared kid who'd grown up counting pennies, who'd built walls so high even he couldn't climb over them anymore. She saw the man she'd loved and the stranger he'd become, and she saw, in the desperate hope on his face, a small chance that maybe he wanted to be something different. "Half an hour," she said. "There's a coffee shop around the corner. We can talk there." "But that's it, Keaton. You get 30 minutes to say whatever you need to say, and then I'm taking my daughter home. Okay?" "Yes. Thank you." Kendra adjusted the carrier strap on her shoulder. "I mean it. 30 minutes. After that, we figure out what comes next. Custody, support, whatever, through lawyers. But right now, I'm cold, I'm tired, and I just lost my job. So if we're doing this, we're doing it now. Can I carry that for you?" Keaton asked, gesturing to what she held. "Please." Kendra hesitated, then handed it over. It felt strange, letting him hold the physical evidence of her termination from his own company. But her arms were tired, and Arya was getting heavier every week. They started walking, side by side but not together, moving down the sidewalk toward the coffee shop Kendra had passed 100 times on her way to the office. Neither of them spoke. The only sounds were their footsteps on concrete and the noise of the city preparing for Christmas. Carolers. Somewhere in the distance, the jingle of bells on a collection bucket, cars honking their way through traffic. Keaton carried what she'd given him like it weighed 100 pounds. Kendra held Arya close, feeling the warmth of her daughter's small body against her chest, the steady rhythm of her breathing. This moment, this collision of past and present, of choices made and consequences faced, felt both inevitable and completely impossible. 6 hours ago, Kendra had been worried about making it through her workday without Arya having a meltdown in the office. Now she was walking down a street with the father her daughter had never met, about to have a conversation that would change all of their lives. The coffee shop came into view, a small corner place with steamed-up windows and string lights in the shape of snowflakes. Through the glass, Kendra could see people sitting at small tables, laughing over lattes, working on laptops, living their normal lives, while hers fell apart and came back together in the same breath. Keaton reached for the door handle and pulled it open, warm air rushing out to meet them. The scent of coffee and cinnamon hit Kendra first, followed by the sound of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. Holiday music played softly from speakers mounted in the corners, something instrumental and gentle that didn't quite match the storm between them. She stepped inside, Keaton following close behind, still holding what she'd packed from her. Desk like he was carrying something sacred instead of a mug, a plant, and a framed photo. The door closed behind them, shutting out the cold and the noise of the street. Inside the warm coffee shop, surrounded by the hum of other people's ordinary days, Kendra Porter and Keaton. Vale stood on the edge of a conversation that neither of them was ready for, but both of them needed. 30 minutes. That's what she'd promised him. 30 minutes to see if the man who'd built an empire could figure out how to be a father. 30 minutes to decide if the woman who'd raised their daughter alone could trust him with even a small piece of their lives. 30 minutes to see if second chances were real or just something. People told themselves to make the pain of first chances hurt less. Keaton set everything down on a table near the window. Kendra unbuttoned her coat carefully, adjusting Arya in the carrier, and the clock started ticking. Kendra slid into the booth by the window, the vinyl seat cracking slightly under her weight. Keaton sat across from her, the items from her desk placed carefully on the seat beside him like evidence he couldn't ignore. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The coffee shop hummed around them, the barista calling out drink orders, the espresso machine, hissing. Two women at the next table laughing about something on a phone screen. Normal life, continuing as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Keaton's eyes kept drifting to Arya, who had woken up and was making soft, cooing sounds against Kendra's chest, her tiny fist waving in the air. "Can I?" He stopped, swallowing. "Can I hold her?" Kendra's first instinct was to say no, to protect her daughter from a man who'd already proven he knew how to leave. But she looked at his face, at the naked hope and terror warring there, and remembered that, whatever he'd done to her, Arya deserved to know her father if he was willing to show up. "Have you ever held a baby before?" she asked. "No." "Then pay attention." Kendra carefully unbuckled the carrier straps and lifted Arya out, supporting her head with one hand. The baby blinked up at her, those hazel eyes with gold flecks catching the light from the window. "You have to support her head and neck," Kendra instructed. "She can't do it herself yet. Cradle her against your chest, one hand under her bottom, the other behind her head and shoulders." Keaton positioned his arms the way she showed him, and Kendra gently transferred Arya into his hold. The moment his daughter settled against him, Keaton's entire face transformed. His breath caught. His eyes filled. One tear spilled over and tracked down his cheek, and he didn't bother wiping it away, because both his hands were occupied with the most important thing he'd ever held. "Oh my God," he whispered. "She's so small. She's actually pretty average for her age. 7 pounds 4 ounces at birth. She's up to 11 pounds now." But Keaton wasn't really listening. He was staring at Arya like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. His thumb traced the curve of her cheek, so gentle, like he was afraid she might break. Arya made a small sound, her mouth opening and closing. Her tiny hand found the lapel of his suit jacket and gripped it with surprising strength. "She's holding my coat," Keaton said, his voice thick with emotion. "She does that. She likes to hold on to things. She has my eyes." "I know. And, God, Kendra, she has my mother's nose. Do you see it? Right there, that little slope at the bridge?" Kendra had noticed it weeks ago, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a different way. This baby wasn't just hers anymore. She was theirs, a combination of two people who'd loved each other once and failed spectacularly at making it work. "I missed this," Keaton said quietly, still staring at Arya. "I missed her being born. Missed her first weeks. Missed. How much have I missed, Kendra? How much of her life is already gone?" 3 months, Kendra said. "You missed 3 months. Tell me about it. Please. I want to know everything." So Kendra told him. She told him about the morning sickness that lasted all day, every day, for 16 weeks straight. About working through exhaustion so profound, she'd fall asleep on the subway and miss her stop. About going to prenatal appointments alone, watching other women show up with partners who held their hands and asked the doctor questions. She told him about the fear that crept in late at night when she couldn't sleep because the baby was kicking and her back ached and she couldn't stop thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. She told him about labor, 22 hours of it, and how she'd done it alone except for a nurse named Patricia who held her hand during the worst contractions and told her she was doing great even when Kendra was certain she was dying. She told him about the first time she held Aria, how the baby had been placed on her chest still covered in vernix and blood, how Kendra had looked at that tiny, furious face and felt a love so overwhelming it physically hurt. And she told him about the weeks after, the sleepless nights, the constant worry that she was doing everything wrong, the budget spreadsheets where she calculated down to the dollar how long her savings would last. "I was alone for all of it," Kendra said, her voice steady but her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know that was partially my choice. I chose not to tell you, but I made that choice because I was terrified of what would happen if I did. Terrified you'd think I was trying to trap you or ruin your success. Terrified you'd offer money and nothing else. Terrified you'd try to do the right thing and end up hating me for it." Keaton looked up from Aria, his face stricken. "I was a coward," he said. "Back then when I ended things. I told myself I was being noble, that I was setting you free to find someone better. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of needing you. Scared of you seeing all the broken parts of me and deciding I wasn't worth fixing. So I used work as an excuse. I hid behind ambition and told myself I was making a sacrifice when really I was just running away." "I know," Kendra said. "You do. I've had a lot of time to think about it. A lot of late nights feeding Aria and replaying our relationship in my head. I know you were scared, but that doesn't change the fact that you made a choice, and that choice hurt." Keaton nodded slowly, still holding their daughter against his chest. Aria had settled, her breathing evening out, her eyes starting to droop. "She's falling asleep," he said. "She does that. The movement soothes her. What else should I know about her?" Kendra almost smiled. "She hates having her diaper changed. Screams like you're torturing her every single time. She likes being sung to. Doesn't matter if you're a good singer. She just likes the sound. She has this little grunt she makes right before she wakes up, like she's annoyed that sleeping is over." "What's her favorite song?" "I don't know if she has one yet. I usually just make up nonsense rhymes. She doesn't seem to care as long as someone's paying attention to her." Keaton looked down at Aria, his expression soft and wondering. "I can't believe I almost missed this," he said. "I can't believe I signed a piece of paper this morning that would have sent you both out of my life without me ever knowing she existed. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" Kendra leaned forward, her voice quiet but firm. "You made that decision, ending our relationship, unilaterally. You decided what was best for me without asking me. And this morning, you made a decision that affected my life and our daughter's life, without knowing who we were. You saw a name on a list and signed it because someone told you it was necessary for the bottom line." Keaton's jaw tightened. "You're right. It's a pattern, Keaton. You make decisions from a position of power without seeing the people those decisions hurt. And I need to know, is that who you still are? Because if it is, I don't know if I can let you into Aria's life. She deserves better than a father who shows up when it's convenient and disappears when it gets hard." "I want to be better," Keaton said. "I want to be the father she deserves. But I don't know how. I don't know what that looks like." "It looks like showing up," Kendra said. "Not with money or grand gestures, though child support would be helpful, but with time. It's diapers and feedings and nights when she won't stop crying and you're so tired you can barely stand. It's being there for the boring parts, not just the Instagram-worthy moments. I can do that. Can you? Because your track record isn't great when it comes to being present." The words stung, and Kendra could see it on his face. But she didn't take them back. He needed to hear the truth. "I know I have to earn your trust," Keaton said. "Both of yours. And I know words aren't enough. So here's what I'm going to do." He shifted Aria carefully in his arms, adjusting his grip the way Kendra had shown him. "First, I'm taking full legal and financial responsibility for Aria. Child support, medical expenses, college fund, whatever she needs. We'll do it through lawyers, so everything's documented and fair. I'm not going to use money to control you or to buy my way into her life, but I'm also not going to let you carry this financial burden alone anymore. Kendra nodded slowly. That was reasonable. Second, I'm going to re-examine the restructuring. Not just reverse your termination, though we're going to talk about that, but look at the entire policy. I have someone on my team, Talia Singh, who's been pushing for better protections for parents and more humane layoff procedures. I've been overruling her because the numbers look better my way. That ends now. Why? Kendra challenged. Because you feel guilty about me specifically, or because you actually care about the other people on that list? Both, Keaton admitted. I won't lie to you. Seeing you today, finding out about Arya, that is what made me realize how far I drifted from who I wanted to be. But you're right that it shouldn't take a personal connection for me to see employees as human beings. So I'm committing to changing the systems, not just fixing your situation. If you reverse my termination, it has to be policy-wide, Kendra said firmly. I don't want special treatment because I'm the mother of your child. If you're going to make this right, make it right for everyone. Agreed. And third, Keaton looked down at Arya, his expression tender. Third, I want to be in her life. I want to visit, to help, to learn how to be her father. I know I can't make up for the 3 months I missed, but I can show up for every day going forward. If you'll let me. Kendra studied him, trying to gauge whether this was genuine or just guilt talking. She'd learned the hard way that people made a lot of promises in moments of crisis that they didn't keep once life went back to normal. But she also saw the tears on his face as he held Arya, saw the way his whole body had gone soft and careful around their daughter, saw something in his eyes that looked like the man she'd fallen in love with 8 years ago, the one who talked about taking care of people once he had enough. Here's what I need from you, Kendra said. Before anything else, before we talk about the company or the policies or any of that, you start by being her father. You show up, you learn what she needs, you are present, everything else comes after. I can do that. I'm going to hold you to it. I hope you do. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Arya slept peacefully against Keaton's chest, oblivious to the fact that her entire world had just shifted. What about work? Keaton asked. I know you said you don't want special treatment, but you need income. What if I connect you with Talia Singh? She's been wanting to bring in someone with actual employee experience to consult on policy changes. It would be contract work, well paid, and it wouldn't be a favor. It would be a legitimate job using your skills and perspective. Kendra considered, I'd like to meet her first. Make sure this is real, and not just you creating a position to ease your guilt. Fair. I'll set it up. And we need to talk about custody and legal stuff. With lawyers, I want everything documented so we both know what we're responsible for. Absolutely. Whatever makes you feel secure. Kendra reached across the table, gently taking Arya back from Keaton's arms. The baby stirred but didn't wake, settling against her mother's familiar chest with a small sigh. Keaton's arms looked empty without her. You can visit tomorrow, Kendra said. Come to my apartment around 2. Arya usually naps then, so you can see what she's like when she's awake and fussy. I'll be there. And Keaton? Kendra met his eyes. Don't make promises you can't keep. To her or to me. If you're going to do this, you have to be all in. Because if you walk away again, it won't just be me you're hurting. Keaton stood, leaning over the table to look at Arya one more time. He reached out and gently stroked her cheek with one finger, his touch reverent. I promise, he whispered to the baby. I promise I won't disappear again. I promise I'm going to learn how to be your dad. And I promise that you will always, always matter more than any deal or meeting or dollar amount. He kissed her forehead, his lips barely brushing her skin, and when he pulled back, his eyes were wet. Thank you, he said to Kendra, for telling me, for letting me hold her, for giving me a chance I don't deserve. You're right, you don't deserve it. But she deserves a father who tries, so don't screw this up. I won't. Do you think people with real power can actually change? Or is this just guilt talking? The kind of emotion that fades once the shock wears off and life goes back to normal? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think, and if you're invested in seeing how this plays out, whether Keaton Vale actually follows through or whether Kendra Porter just opened the door to more heartbreak. Hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories, because what happens next is going to test everything they both just promised. Kendra watched Keaton walk out of the coffee shop, his shoulders hunched against the cold, his phone already out, probably texting this Talia Singh person or his lawyers or whoever billionaires contacted when their lives got complicated. She looked down at Arya, who slept peacefully, completely unaware that she'd just met her father for the first time. "Well, baby girl," Kendra whispered, "I hope I just did the right thing." She gathered her things, the carrier, her coat, what Keaton had carried, and then left on the seat. She strapped Arya back into the carrier, bundled herself against the cold, and headed for the subway. The ride home was long, the train crowded with evening commuters. Kendra stood near the door, one hand on the pole, the other supporting Arya. Just wait, and let her mind run through everything that had just happened. She'd told Keaton the truth. She'd let him hold their daughter. She'd opened the door to co-parenting with a man who'd walked away from her once before. Was it hope or foolishness? She didn't know yet. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it that morning, small, cluttered. The breakfast dishes still in the sink because she'd been running late. She set everything on the kitchen counter and carefully unbuckled Arya from the carrier. The baby woke up fully now, her face scrunching in displeasure. "I know, sweetheart," Kendra murmured, bouncing gently. "I know. Big day for both of us." She changed Arya's diaper, enduring the expected screaming, and settled into the worn armchair to nurse. As the baby latched and began to eat, Kendra let her head fall back against the cushion. Tomorrow, Keaton Vale will show up at her door. Tomorrow, they'd start trying to figure out what CO parenting looked like. Tomorrow, she'd find out if his promises meant anything, or if she'd just set herself up for another round of heartbreak. But tonight, in her small apartment with her daughter in her arms, Kendra Porter allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The morning after Keaton Vale held his daughter for the first time, he walked into the executive boardroom on the 42nd floor and called an emergency meeting. Trent Hollis arrived first, coffee in hand, his expression already skeptical. He settled into his usual chair with the practiced ease of someone who had sat through hundreds of these meetings and expected this one to be no different. A woman Keaton had been avoiding for weeks came next. Lauren Price was the board's most vocal advocate for shareholder interests, a former investment banker who measured everything in quarterly returns and viewed employee welfare as a line item to be minimized. She carried a tablet tucked under her arm like a weapon and wore an expression that suggested she already knew what this meeting was about and had prepared her counter-arguments. Talia Singh slipped in last, quiet and watchful, taking a seat at the far end of the table. She caught Keaton's eye and gave him a small nod of encouragement. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Keaton said, standing at the head of the table rather than sitting. "We need to talk about the restructuring." Trent leaned back in his chair. "The restructuring we finalized 2 days ago. The one you personally signed off on?" "That's the one." Lauren's eyes narrowed. "Keaton, we've already begun processing terminations. HR has sent notifications. Some employees have already cleared their desks. The severance packages are being processed as we speak." "I'm aware." Keaton placed both hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. "And I'm telling you we're revisiting those decisions, starting with anyone terminated within 6 months of returning from parental leave." The silence in the room was immediate and heavy. Trent set his coffee down slowly, the ceramic mug clicking against the polished wood of the conference table. "This is about the woman from yesterday, isn't it?" Trent asked. "The one you chased out of the building? Her name is Kendra Porter. And yes, seeing her helped me realize how far we've drifted from what this company was supposed to be. But this isn't just about her. It's about every name on that list. Every person we treated like a number instead of a human being. With respect, Lauren said, her voice cool and measured. This sounds emotional, short-sighted. We made those cuts based on data, not feelings. The analysis was thorough. The positions eliminated were redundant or underperforming. Shareholders expect fiscal responsibility, and what you're proposing undermines everything we presented to them last quarter. Shareholders expect us to make money, Keaton interrupted. They don't expect us to fire new mothers 4 days before Christmas so we can hit a quarterly target that's already exceeded projections by 12%. The optics of reversing course could be worse than the optics of laying off parents during the holidays while our CEO takes home an 8-figure bonus are far worse than the optics of admitting we made a mistake and fixing it. Keaton looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. I grew up watching my mother work 3 jobs to keep the lights on. Marisol Vale spent years terrified of rent day, sitting at the kitchen table trying to figure out which bills she could pay and which ones would have to wait. I built this company so I could take care of people the way no one took care of us. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. Trent opened his mouth to respond, but Keaton kept going. Yesterday, I watched a woman walk out of my building with a cardboard box and a 3-month-old baby strapped to her chest. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't know I was the one who signed the paper that ended her job. But I knew. And I'm telling you right now, we are not that kind of company. Not anymore. Lauren exchanged a glance with Trent. Keaton, I understand this has affected you personally, but personal feelings cannot drive corporate policy. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors, and what you're describing would set a precedent that... Talia, Keaton turned to the woman at the end of the table. You've been advocating for better protections for months. You told me you had proposals ready. I should have listened then. I'm listening now. Talia Singh straightened in her chair, pulling a folder from her bag. I've prepared data on employee retention, the hidden costs of turnover and case studies from companies that have successfully balanced profit with humane policies. If you'll give me 20 minutes, I can walk everyone through the numbers. Take as long as you need. For the next 2 hours, they argued. Talia presented her data methodically, charts showing that replacing an employee cost between 50 and 200% of their annual salary, studies demonstrating that companies with strong parental leave policies had 30% lower turnover, examples of corporations that had improved their bottom line by investing in employee welfare rather than cutting it. Lauren pushed back on every point, citing short-term margins and investor expectations. Trent remained skeptical but quieter than usual, his expression shifting from dismissive to thoughtful as Talia's presentation continued. By noon, they had hammered out a framework. No layoffs within 6 months of an employee returning from parental leave. A hardship review panel that would assess individual circumstances before any termination decision, ensuring that the people making choices about someone's livelihood actually understood whose life they were affecting. And the creation of an employee and community wellness initiative, a real department with real budget and real authority. Not just a public relations line item designed to make the company look good without actually helping anyone. One more thing, Keaton said as they prepared to adjourn. Pull Kendra Porter's name from the terminated list. Have HR reach out today with reinstatement information. Lauren's jaw tightened. If this gets out and people think you're playing favorites, it will get out. And when it does, we'll explain that her reinstatement was part of a wider policy correction affecting multiple employees. Because that's the truth. She's not the only one being reinstated. Anyone who was let go while on parental leave or within 6 months of returning gets the same consideration. The meeting ended with Lauren still visibly frustrated and Trent looking like a man who had watched the ground shift beneath his feet without quite understanding how. But the policies had been approved. The initiative had been funded. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Keaton Vale felt like he was building something worth being proud of. Across the city, in a small apartment that smelled faintly of baby powder and the soup she had reheated for the 3rd time that week, Kendra Porter sat on her worn couch with Aria in one arm and a stack of bills in the other. The numbers didn't work. They never worked, but today they felt especially impossible. Rent was due in 2 weeks. The electricity bill was already late. Her savings account balance had dropped below $1,000, and the formula Aria needed cost $30 a can. She had spent the morning sending out job applications, 12 so far, to companies she had never heard of, for positions she was overqualified for. The job market was brutal in December. No one wanted to hire until after the new year. She might have to pick up retail shifts or wait tables just to make it through January. A knock at the door made her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, she considered not answering, pretending she wasn't home, avoiding. Whatever bad news or awkward interaction waited on the other side. But Aria chose that moment to make a small sound, and Kendra sighed, shifting the baby to her shoulder as she moved to the door. She opened it to find an older man standing in the hallway, grocery, bags hanging from both arms, a gentle smile on his weathered face. Milo Reyes lived 2 floors up. He was a retired teacher who had started checking on her after Aria was born, when he had heard the baby crying through the thin walls late one night and knocked on her door the next morning to ask if she needed anything. Since then, he had become something like a family, the uncle or grandfather she had never had, always appearing with food she hadn't asked for and wisdom she hadn't known she needed. "Before you say you don't need help," Milo said, already pushing past her into the kitchen, "I bought too much at the store, and these oranges are going to go bad if someone doesn't eat them. Also, I made rice and beans last night, and there's no way I can finish all of it myself." "Milo, you didn't have to." "I know I didn't have to. That's what makes it nice." He started unpacking the bags, oranges, bread, milk, a generous container of homemade rice and beans that smelled amazing. "How's the little one?" "Fussy. I think she's going through a growth spurt. She wants to eat every 2 hours and she's not sleeping well. They do that. It passes." He glanced at the bills visible on the couch, the stack she hadn't managed to hide before answering the door. "How's everything else?" Kendra sighed, settling into the armchair with Aria. "It's been 1 day since I lost my job. I've sent out 12 applications, no responses yet. And I'm trying not to panic about how I'm going to make rent. Give it time. Something will come through. Time is exactly what I don't have." Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Milo glanced at it, then handed it to her without comment. The screen showed a new email notification. The sender made her stomach drop. "HR Department, Vale Enterprises." For a long moment, Kendra just stared at it. Then, with a deep breath, she opened the message. "Dear Ms. Porter, following a recent review of our restructuring policies, we are pleased to inform you that your termination has been reversed. We recognize that the timing and circumstances of your separation from the company did not reflect our values or our commitment to supporting employees, particularly those balancing work with family responsibilities. Additionally, we would like to discuss your potential involvement in a new employee and community wellness initiative being developed within Vale Enterprises. Given your experience both as an employee and as a new mother, we believe your perspective would be invaluable in shaping policies that truly serve our workforce. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss next steps." She read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change, but she kept expecting them to. "What is it?" Milo asked. "They want me back. The company that just fired you? Apparently, they've had a change of heart." Kendra's voice was skeptical, the hope she felt warring with years of learned caution. "Or a change of PR strategy." Her phone buzzed again, this time a text message. The sender was Keaton Vale. "I know you're probably reading that email and thinking it's about you specifically. It's not. We changed policies for everyone. Your reinstatement is part of a wider correction that affects multiple employees. But I also think you'd be perfect for the new initiative. Your experience as both an employee and a mother is exactly what we need to make sure these policies actually work for real people. No pressure. Your choice." Kendra showed both messages to Milo, who read them carefully, his expression thoughtful. "What do you think?" she asked. I think returning could mean financial stability and a real chance to change things from the inside, he said slowly. Working on an initiative like this, you could help make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to someone else. That's meaningful work. But it also risks tangling you up with this man and his world in ways that might be complicated. You have history. You have a child together. Going back to his company means seeing him regularly, navigating that relationship while also trying to do your job. He paused. That's not easy. So what should I do? I'm not here to make your decisions for you. I learned a long time ago that giving people answers doesn't help as much as helping them find their own. He smiled gently. But I will say this. Don't let fear alone drive the choice. Fear protects us, and that's valuable. But fear can also trap us, keep us from opportunities that might change our lives. Sometimes the scary path is the right one. Kendra looked at Arya, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder, completely. Unaware that her mother's entire future was being decided via text message, she thought about what it would mean to go back. Financial security, the health insurance, the chance to do work that mattered, that helped people like her. But also the risk, the emotional entanglement, the power imbalance, the possibility that this was all just a temporary gesture that would fade once the scandal died down. She picked up her phone and typed a reply to Keaton. I'll come back, but only if I work on meaningful projects, employee-focused, not just marketing campaigns designed to make the company look good. I want to help build something that actually makes a difference for people, something humane, not just profitable. The response came within seconds. Agreed. I'll loop you in with Talia Singh. She's leading the initiative, and she's exactly the kind of person you'll want to work with. She's been fighting for these changes for months. Kendra set down her phone and looked at Milo, who was watching her with an expression that managed to be both proud and cautious. I guess I'm going back to work, she said. Sounds like it. Do you think I'm making a mistake? I think you're making a choice. Those are different things. He finished putting away the groceries and moved toward the door. Get some rest. You're going to need your energy. After he left, Kendra sat in the quiet of her apartment, Arya warm and heavy against her chest, and let herself imagine what the next few months might look like. A job that meant something. A chance to help other mothers who were struggling the way she had struggled. A relationship with her daughter's father that might possibly become something real. It was terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. She wasn't sure which feeling was stronger. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear, the kind of winter evening that made the city look almost magical despite itself. Lights in windows, snow just starting to fall, the distant sound of carolers on some nearby street corner. Kendra just finished giving Arya a bath, a production that involved more water, on the floor than in the tub, and required 3 towels to clean up afterward. The baby was fed, changed and drowsy in her bouncer, watching the ceiling with the unfocused fascination of someone who had only been alive for 3 months and found everything equally interesting. A knock at the door interrupted the quiet. Kendra checked the peephole and felt her heart skip. Keaton Vale stood in the hallway, holding a casserole dish covered in foil in one hand and a small shopping bag in the other. He was wearing a coat she didn't recognize, simpler than his usual style, less expensive looking, and his hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it on the way over. She opened the door. From my mother, he said immediately, holding up the casserole dish. She insisted. She said no one should spend Christmas Eve without a home-cooked meal, and she wasn't taking no for an answer. Your mother made this. She's been cooking since 5 this morning. There's enough food at her house to feed a small army, but she specifically wanted me to bring this to you. He held up the bag in his other hand. I also brought some things for Arya. Nothing flashy, just some onesies and a blanket that my mom picked out. She said, babies can never have too many blankets. Kendra stepped aside to let him in, unsure whether she was grateful for the gesture or overwhelmed by it. The apartment felt smaller with him in it. He was too tall for the low ceilings, too polished for the second-hand furniture, too much of everything she had spent the last year learning to live without. But he also looked different than he had in the coffee shop a few days ago. Less desperate, less like a man who was drowning. and had just grabbed onto whatever was closest. He seemed more settled somehow, more present. "Can I help with anything?" he asked, setting the casserole on the kitchen counter. "Dishes are in the sink. I haven't had time to deal with them." He rolled up his sleeves and got to work without complaint. Kendra watched him for a moment. This billionaire standing at her tiny sink, washing dishes she had been too exhausted to tackle, acting as if it was the most natural thing in the world. It was strange and disorienting, and also, somehow, exactly what she needed. She put away the onesies and the blanket, both of which were softer than anything she had been able to afford. Then she checked on Arya, who had fallen asleep in her bouncer, and settled onto the couch to wait. When the dishes were done and the casserole had been put in the refrigerator for tomorrow, Keaton dried his hands and sat down in the armchair across from her. Close enough to talk, far enough to respect boundaries. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, "about ambition, about the difference between building something that matters and building something that just looks impressive from the outside. And I think I spent a long time confusing the two." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression earnest. "I told myself I was making sacrifices for success, that all the late nights and missed dinners and broken promises were necessary, that I was building something important and everyone else just needed to understand that. But the truth is, I was just scared. Scared of needing people, scared of being needed, scared that if I slowed down long enough to really look at my life, I'd realize I'd built something hollow. What changed? You, Arya. Seeing that box in your arms and knowing I was the reason it was there." He paused, his voice dropping. "I can't undo the last 8 years. I can't get back the time I missed with our daughter or give you back the months you spent alone and scared. But I can choose differently now. I can try to be someone worth trusting, someone worth taking a chance on." Kendra studied his face, the earnestness there, the fear beneath it, the hope that he wasn't quite allowing himself to fully express. "I want to believe you," she said quietly. "I know, and I know words aren't enough, so I'm going to keep showing up until my actions prove what my words can't." The space between them felt charged, full of everything they'd lost and everything they might still build. 8 years of silence. 3 months of their daughter's life. Choices that couldn't be unmade, only built upon. Keaton leaned toward her slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was soft, tentative, not a promise of forever, but an acknowledgement of possibility, a door cracking open after being sealed shut for years. When they pulled apart, Kendra's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. The text message made her breath catch. "This is Marisol Vale. Keaton gave me your number, and I hope that's okay. I know we haven't met yet, but I've heard so much about you and that beautiful baby girl. I would love to have you both over for Christmas dinner tomorrow. Nothing fancy, just family. You're part of that now, if you want to be." Kendra read the message twice, the word family echoing in her mind. She had spent so long doing everything alone, building walls to protect herself, learning to need no one because needing people only led to disappointment. The word family felt foreign, dangerous even, but also, maybe, exactly what she had been missing. She typed her reply. "We'd love to come. Thank you for the invitation." She set down the phone and looked at Keaton, who was watching her with an expression that was equal parts hope and terror, like a man who had been given something precious and was afraid he might break it. "Your mother invited us for Christmas," Kendra said. "I know. I told her to wait until I'd softened you up first. She doesn't listen. I'm starting to think that runs in the family." He smiled, a real smile, the kind she remembered from 8 years ago, before success had hardened him into someone she barely recognized. "Merry Christmas Eve, Kendra. Merry Christmas Eve, Keaton." And for the first time in a very long time, Kendra Porter allowed herself to believe that, maybe, just maybe, the worst moment of her life was becoming the beginning of something better. Christmas morning at Marisol Vale's house was everything Kendra hadn't known she needed. The house itself was modest, a small 2-story home in a neighborhood that had seen better. Decades, with a patched roof and a front porch that creaked when you walked on it. Nothing like the penthouse Keaton could have bought his mother a dozen times over. But Marisol had refused every offer to move, insisting that this was where she had raised her son, where she had survived the hard years, and she wasn't leaving just because he had gotten rich. Kendra liked her immediately. Marisol Vale was a small woman with silver-streaked hair and hands that looked like they had done hard work for many decades. She moved through her kitchen with practiced efficiency, stirring pots and checking the oven, and somehow managing to hold a conversation while doing 3 things at once. "Let me see that baby," she said, the moment they walked through the door, reaching for Aria with the confidence of someone who had held hundreds of children and wasn't intimidated by one more. "Oh, look at you. You have your father's eyes, you know that? Same stubborn expression too." "I recognize that look. She gets that from her mother," Keaton said from behind Kendra. Kendra elbowed him. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted meat and something sweet baking in the oven. A Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, decorated with ornaments that looked handmade and decades old. Paper stars and painted wooden figures and strings of popcorn that had probably been made when Keaton was a child. "I hope you're hungry," Marisol said, bouncing Aria gently. "I made enough food for an army, force of habit from years of not knowing when the next paycheck was coming. Better to have too much than too little." "I'm always hungry," Kendra admitted. "Good. I like a woman with an appetite." Marisol winked at her. "Keaton, make yourself useful. The potatoes need mashing, and you're the only one with arms strong enough to do it properly." Kendra watched Keaton move to the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves, falling into an easy rhythm with his mother that spoke of years of practice. He looked different here, softer, more human, less like a billionaire and more like someone's son, helping with Christmas dinner because that's what family did. Marisol appeared at Kendra's elbow, Aria still cradled in her arms. "He's not the same person he was," she said quietly, so only Kendra could hear. "I know you have every reason to doubt him. He hurt you. He ran away when things got hard. He made choices that I raised him better than to make." She paused. "But I'm telling you, as his mother, as someone who knows him better than anyone, he's trying, really trying. For the first time in a long time, he's trying to be the man I always hoped he would become." "I know," Kendra said. "I'm starting to see it. Give him time. He'll prove it. That's what I'm counting on." The dinner was loud and chaotic and perfect. Milo Reyes showed up halfway through, having been invited by Kendra with Marisol's enthusiastic blessing. He arrived with a bottle of wine and a story about getting lost on the subway that had everyone laughing. Keaton changed Aria's diaper without being asked, handling it with the careful concentration of someone who was still learning but determined to get it right. Kendra laughed at Marisol's stories about Keaton as a child, the disastrous attempts at entrepreneurship, the questionable fashion choices of his teenage years, the time he had tried to cook dinner for Mother's Day and nearly burned down the kitchen. For a few hours everything felt normal, simple, good, like maybe this could work, like maybe she hadn't made a mistake by letting him in. The story broke 3 days after Christmas. The headlines spread across social media like wildfire, shared and reshared by thousands, of people who were angry about corporate greed and looking for a target. Tech giant lays off new mothers before holidays, inside the heartless restructuring a major retail conglomerate. Someone, a former employee, anonymous and angry, had posted a detailed account of being terminated while on parental leave, complete with screenshots of the generic HR email and a photo of the cardboard box they'd been given to pack their desk. The post didn't name Vale Enterprises directly. It didn't have to. The details were specific enough that people connected the dots within hours. By morning, the comment sections were flooded with outrage. Keaton sat in his office, watching the crisis unfold across 3 different screens. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since 6 in the morning. Investors were calling. Journalists were requesting comments. The company's social media accounts were being flooded with angry messages. Trent Hollis burst through the door without knocking. "We need to get ahead of this. PR is drafting a statement, something about isolated incidents and internal reviews. We can frame this as a misunderstanding that's being addressed. No. No? Trent stared at him. Keaton, this is a full-blown crisis. Our stock is down 4% since the story broke. We need to control the narrative before it controls us. We're not going to lie. Keaton turned away from the screens to face him. We're not going to minimize what happened or pretend it was an isolated incident. We made mistakes, real ones that affected real people. And we're going to own them publicly. Lauren Price appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, her expression thunderous. The board is concerned. 3 members have called me this morning asking what we're going to do about this. If we don't put out a statement in the next hour that reassures investors, then we put out an honest one. Keaton stood. We acknowledge that our restructuring process failed to adequately protect vulnerable employees. We announce the policy changes we've already made. We commit to doing better, publicly, transparently, without excuses. That's admitting liability, Lauren said flatly. Our legal team will have a heart attack. That's admitting humanity. There's a difference. The argument continued for another 20 minutes. Voices rising, tensions escalating. Lauren insisted that honesty was a luxury they couldn't afford. Trent tried to find a middle ground that didn't exist. Keaton refused to budge. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Kendra, I have to take this, he said, stepping away from the group and moving toward the window. Keaton, we're in the middle of... Lauren started. He answered the call. Keaton. Her voice was tight, controlled, but he could hear the fear beneath it. The kind of fear that made his heart stop. Something's wrong with Aria. She has a fever, a high one, and she's breathing weird. I don't know if I should call an ambulance or take her to the emergency room myself or... Where are you? Home. I'm trying to figure out what to do. I called the pediatrician, but they said if her fever is over 102 and she's having trouble breathing, I should take her to the ER, but I don't have a car and the subway would take too long and... I'm on my way. Stay there. I'll pick you up and we'll go together. He hung up and turned to Trent and Lauren, who were watching him with barely concealed frustration. I have to go, he said. Family emergency. Keaton, we're in the middle of a crisis, Lauren said. The board is waiting for a response. Investors are panicking. You can't just... My daughter is sick. The words came out sharper than he intended, cutting through the room like a blade. She's 3 months old, and she has a high fever and trouble breathing, and I am going to be there for her. Handle the statement. Make it honest. I'll review it when I can. He was out the door before they could respond. The hospital waiting room was a particular kind of hell. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, unflattering glow. Plastic chairs lined the walls, filled with anxious families and crying children and elderly patients waiting to be seen. The constant beeping of machines drifted from somewhere down the hall, punctuated by the occasional announcement over the PA system. Kendra sat with her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes fixed on the door where they'd taken Aria an hour ago. The baby had been lethargic and hot in Kendra's arms the whole drive over, her tiny chest rising and falling too fast, her skin flushed and dry. Keaton sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He hadn't said much since they'd arrived, just sat with her, waiting, his leg bouncing with nervous energy that he couldn't quite contain. Neither of them spoke for a long time. I should have noticed sooner, Kendra finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. She was fussy yesterday, but I thought it was just the excitement from Christmas. Too many new people, too much stimulation. I should have paid closer attention. You couldn't have known. I'm her mother. I should have known. Keaton reached over and took her hand. She let him, too exhausted and scared to pull away. She's going to be okay, he said. You don't know that? No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway. They sat in silence again, hands intertwined, waiting for news that seemed like it would never come. When the doctor finally appeared, a young woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders, the look of someone who had delivered both good news and bad news so many times that she'd learned to keep her expression neutral. Kendra jumped to her feet so fast she nearly knocked over her chair. Family of Aria Porter? Yes, I'm her mother. Is she okay? What's wrong with her? She has a respiratory infection, the doctor said calmly. It's fairly common in infants her age, especially during the winter months. However, her fever was high enough that we wanted to keep her overnight for observation and for fluids. We'll monitor her breathing and make sure the infection doesn't spread to her lungs. But she's going to be okay. She's responding well to treatment. We expect a full recovery within a few days. Kendra's knees nearly buckled with relief. Keaton caught her elbow, steadying her, his own face pale with the fear he'd been trying to hide. "Can we see her?" he asked. "Of course. Follow me." The room was small and dim, dominated by a crib with high rails and monitors that beeped too loud for comfort. Aria lay in the center, impossibly small, and 4-line taped to her tiny arm. She was asleep, her breathing steadier now than it had been in the car, her color slowly returning to normal. Kendra moved to the crib immediately, her hand reaching through the rails to touch her daughter's cheek. "I'm here, baby. Mama's here. You're going to be okay." Keaton hung back, watching them from the doorway. His daughter, so small and fragile, hooked up to machines he didn't fully understand. His chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with his heart. "You can come closer," Kendra said without looking at him. He did. Standing beside Kendra, looking down at their daughter, Keaton felt something shift inside him. All the meetings, all the investor calls, all the headlines and stock prices and quarterly reports, none of it mattered. Not compared to this. Not compared to this tiny person who shared his eyes and his stubbornness, and who needed him to be better than he'd ever been. "I've never been this scared in my life," he admitted quietly. Kendra looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, she saw past the suit, past the success, past the man who'd walked away 8 years ago. She saw a father, terrified and helpless, and completely in love with a daughter he'd only just met. "Welcome to parenthood," she said. The night passed slowly. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting the 4, offering reassurances. That felt hollow until Aria's fever finally broke around 3 in the morning. The monitor readings stabilized. The baby's breathing eased. The doctor confirmed that she was responding well to treatment and would likely be discharged the next day. Kendra dozed in the chair beside the crib, too exhausted to stay awake but too worried to really sleep. Keaton sat on the floor with his back against the wall, his phone buzzing constantly with messages he ignored. Somewhere across town, Lauren Price was probably drafting angry emails about his absence. The board was probably convening emergency calls. The stock price was probably still dropping. He didn't care. Around 4 in the morning, Kendra woke up and found him staring at the ceiling. "You should get some rest," she said. "Can't. The fever broke. She's going to be fine." "I know." He paused, his voice quiet. "I keep thinking about all the parents who've sat in rooms like this. All the nights I've worked late or taken calls or signed papers while someone else was in a hospital, terrified and alone. I never understood what that felt like. I couldn't understand because I'd never let myself be close enough to anyone to feel it." Kendra moved from the chair to the floor beside him. Their shoulders touched. "This is what it looks like," she said quietly. "If you're really going to change, you're going to disappoint people who liked the old version of you better. The ruthless one. The one who never let anything get in the way of the deal. The one who was always available, always on call, always putting the company first." "I know. Lauren Price is probably furious right now, almost certainly. And you're sitting on a hospital floor anyway." Keaton turned to look at her. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." They sat in silence for a while, watching Aria sleep, her breathing steady and peaceful now. "We should talk about logistics," Kendra said eventually. "Custody, child support, legal stuff. I know it's not romantic, but if we're going to do this, whatever this is, we need to do it right." "Agreed. I'll have my lawyers draw something up, but I want you to know." He turned to face her fully. "I'm not going to use money or power to control this situation. Whatever we put in writing, it's going to protect you and Aria, not trap you, not give me leverage over you. I want you to feel safe, not obligated." That's a nice thing to say. I mean it. I know you think you do. But you've never been on the other side of that equation. You've never been the person with less power, wondering if the other person's promises will hold up when things get hard. Keaton was quiet for a moment. You're right. I haven't. So tell me what would make you feel safe, and I'll do it. Kendra considered. Joint legal custody, but I have primary residence. Visitation schedule that we both agree on, with flexibility for emergencies. Child support that's fair but doesn't make me dependent on you. I want to be able to stand on my own, and everything documented by my lawyer, not just yours. Done. Is that easy? Kendra, I missed the first 3 months of my daughter's life, because I was too, focused on building an empire to notice there were people in it who needed me. I'm not going to miss any more by fighting you on logistics. She studied him for a long moment, searching for the catch, the angle, the hidden agenda. She didn't find one. Okay, she finally said. Okay. Arya made a small sound in her sleep, that familiar grunt that meant she was about to wake up. Kendra rose to check on her, and Keaton followed. They stood together at the crib, watching their daughter's eyes flutter open. Hey, baby girl, Kendra whispered. We're right here. Both of us. Arya's gaze moved between them, unfocused but calm. For the first time, they looked like what they were trying to become. A family. They left the hospital the next morning, exhausted but united. Arya was bundled in the blanket Marisol Vale had given them for Christmas, sleeping peacefully against Kendra's chest. The winter sun was pale but present, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Keaton held the door. Kendra walked through, and somewhere across town, in a boardroom filled with expensive furniture and expensive people, Lauren Price was preparing for the confrontation that would determine everything. The morning of the board meeting, Keaton Vale stood in front of his bathroom mirror and tried to remember the last time he'd felt this nervous. Not anxious about a deal, not worried about quarterly numbers, genuinely nervous in a way that went beyond business, because what happened in the next few hours would determine not just the future of his company, but the kind of man he was going to be. The boardroom on the 42nd floor had never felt smaller. Directors filled every seat around the polished table, shareholders, executives, people who had helped him build his empire and who now questioned whether he was still fit to lead it. Trent Hollis sat to his left, his expression carefully neutral. Lauren Price sat to his right, her tablet open, her fingers poised over the screen. Let's get to the point, Lauren said, her voice crisp and professional. The viral story has done significant damage to our public image. Our stock is down 6% from last week. Investors are nervous. The statement we released was honest, but honesty doesn't always reassure markets. And the policy changes you've implemented are being viewed by some as reactionary and financially irresponsible. The policy changes are the right thing to do, Keaton said calmly. The right thing to do doesn't always align with shareholder interests. We have a fiduciary responsibility. I'm aware of our fiduciary responsibility. I'm also aware that we have a responsibility to the people who work for us, the people who show up every day, who make this company run, who trust us, to treat them like human beings instead of line items on a spreadsheet. Trent leaned forward. Keaton, I've supported you through a lot. The late nights, the aggressive expansion, the risks that paid off. But this feels different. This feels personal, and personal decisions don't always belong in the boardroom. Every decision is personal to someone, Keaton replied. We just don't usually have to look them in the eye when we make it. Lauren's jaw tightened. The numbers don't support what you're proposing. Extended parental protections, hardship review panels, this wellness initiative. It all costs money. Money that comes directly from our bottom line, which means money that comes from our shareholders. Talia Singh spoke up from her seat near the end of the table. Actually, the numbers tell a more complicated story. She pulled up a presentation on the screen behind Keaton, charts and graphs and case studies that she'd been preparing for months, waiting for this moment. Companies that invest in employee welfare consistently outperform those that don't over the long term, she continued. Reduced turnover, increased loyalty, higher productivity, better public perception. The cost of replacing an employee can be anywhere from 50 to 200% of their annual salary. When you factor in lost institutional knowledge, decreased morale among remaining staff, and the time it takes to train new hires, cutting employees to save money often ends up costing more than it saves. Long-term doesn't help us next quarter, Lauren countered. Next quarter isn't the only quarter that matters. If we keep making decisions that sacrifice our long-term health for short-term gains, we won't have a company left to worry about in 5 years. The room fell silent. Keaton could feel the tension, the battle lines being drawn between those who saw employees as costs to be minimized and those who saw them as investments to be nurtured. "I'm going to tell you a story," he said quietly. No one moved. "When I was 8 years old, my mother got laid off from her job at a department store. 2 weeks before Christmas, they gave her a cardboard box and 20 minutes to clear her desk, and they called security to escort her out like she was a criminal instead of someone who had given them 6 years of loyal service." He paused, letting the words settle. She'd never missed a day, never complained, but the company was restructuring, and her name was on a list, and someone in a corner office signed a paper without ever knowing who she was or what that signature would mean for her life. Lauren opened her mouth to speak, but Keaton kept going. "We spent that Christmas eating soup from cans and pretending the lights on. Our tiny tree were enough to make up for the presents we couldn't afford. I was too young to fully understand what had happened, but I was old enough to see my mother crying when she thought I was asleep. Old enough to know that something had been taken from us, and that the people who took it didn't care." The room was completely silent now. Even Lauren had closed her mouth. "I built this company because I wanted to be different. I wanted to prove that you could succeed without grinding people down, that profit and humanity weren't mutually exclusive, that you could take care of your employees and your shareholders at the same time." He looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I signed restructuring papers without looking at the names. I let efficiency become more important than empathy. I became the kind of person my 8-year-old self would have hated." He straightened, his voice hardening with conviction. "I'm done forgetting. We are not going to be the company that fires new mothers at Christmas. We are not going to treat employees like disposable resources to be used up and thrown away. And if we grow by destroying the lives of the people who work for us, then what we're building isn't success. It's just rotten with pretty packaging." Lauren's expression was cold. "That's a compelling speech, Keaton, but speeches don't satisfy shareholders. Speeches don't pay dividends. What happens when our quarterly numbers come in below projections because we've increased costs without increasing revenue? We tell them the truth, that we're investing in our workforce because it's the right thing to do and because it will make us stronger in the long run. We show them the data Talia just presented. We make the case that sustainable business practices are better for everyone, including shareholders. And if they're not convinced, if they decide they'd rather have leadership that prioritizes profits over principles," Keaton met her eyes without flinching, "then they can find someone else to run this company. I won't lead an organization that treats people as expendable. That's my line, and I'm not crossing it." The ultimatum landed like a physical blow. Several directors exchanged uneasy glances. Trent rubbed his temples. Lauren's fingers stopped moving over her tablet. "You're willing to risk your position for this?" she asked. "I'm willing to risk my position because of this. If I can't lead with integrity, I don't want to lead at all." The debate that followed was heated and exhausting. Lauren marshaled her arguments about fiduciary duty and shareholder expectations. Talia countered with data and case studies. Trent tried to find compromises that didn't exist. Other directors weighed in, some supporting Keaton, others backing Lauren. After 2 hours, they called for a vote. It was close, closer than Keaton would have liked. But when the hands were counted, a majority of the board had sided with him. The new employee policies would stand. The wellness initiative would be funded, and Vail Enterprises would publicly commit to learning from the restructuring scandal and doing better. Lauren Price voted against, so did 2 other directors. But they were outnumbered. As the meeting adjourned, Trent caught Keaton's arm. "That was a hell of a gamble." he said quietly. I know. It could have gone the other way. I know that too. Trent studied him for a moment. You've changed. I'm trying to... Across town, Kendra sat in her apartment with Arya on her lap, watching. News coverage of the Vale Enterprises controversy on her laptop. The headlines were mixed. Some outlets praised the policy changes as a model for corporate responsibility. Others criticized them as performative damage control, too little too late. Social media was divided between people who thought Keaton Vale was finally showing real leadership and people who thought he was just trying to save his public image. Milo Reyes sat in the armchair by the window, a cup of tea cooling in his hands. What do you think? Kendra asked. I think it's too early to tell, he said honestly. Words are easy. Policies on paper are harder. Actually changing a company's culture is the hardest thing of all. It takes years, and most people give up before they get there. So I shouldn't trust it. I didn't say that. He set down his tea. I said you shouldn't base your decision on what he says. Base it on what he does, over time. Consistently. Words mean very little. Actions mean everything. And if he doesn't follow through, then you walk away with your head held high, knowing you gave him a fair chance. You've done it before. You can do it again. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kendra opened it to find Keaton standing in the hallway, still in his suit from the board meeting, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him, but also somehow lighter. Like a weight had been lifted. It's done, he said. The policy's passed. The initiative is funded. Everything we talked about is happening. I saw the news. I wanted you to hear it from me. He paused. Can I come in? She stepped aside. Keaton entered the apartment, nodding politely at Milo, then crouching down to look at Arya, who was watching him with the wide-eyed curiosity of someone who couldn't possibly understand what was happening, but found it fascinating anyway. Hey, little one, he said softly. Your daddy had a big day. I told some very important people that they couldn't fire mommies at Christmas anymore. I don't think they were very happy about it, but I don't really care. Arya made a sound that might have been approval or might have been gas. Either way, Keaton smiled. Kendra watched him with their daughter, the gentleness of his hands, the wonder in his eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. Tell me about the meeting, she said. He did. All of it. The arguments, the data, the ultimatum, the vote. He didn't minimize his own role or exaggerate his victory. He just told her what happened, honestly and completely. When he finished, Kendra was quiet for a long moment. You really told them you'd quit if they didn't change? I really did. Why? You've spent years building that company. It's your whole life. Because I finally realized what I was actually building. He looked at her, his expression raw and unguarded. Not a company, not a legacy, just a pile of money with no one to share it with. And I don't want that anymore. I want something real. I want a family. I want to be someone my daughter is proud of. Milo rose quietly, gathering his coat. I should go. Let you two talk. Milo, you don't have to. Kendra started. I know. But this conversation needs to happen without an audience. He smiled gently. Call me if you need anything. After he left, Kendra and Keaton sat together on the couch, Arya between them, the weight of everything unsaid filling the room. I want to try, Kendra finally said. This, us, whatever we're becoming, but I need it to be real, and I need it to be slow. Co-parenting first, relationship second. No rushing into anything because it feels good at the moment. No grand gestures that substitute for actual work. I can do that. You have to earn my trust, Keaton, every day. You can't buy it with money or charm your way past it. You have to earn it through actions, through consistency, through showing up even when it's hard and boring and no one is watching. I know. And if you hurt her, she looked at Arya, if you disappear again, if you break your promises, if you go back to being the person you were, I will walk away. And I will take her with me. I won't let her grow up wondering why her father chose his company over her. I understand. Don't make promises. Show me. He nodded. I will. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Kendra leaned over and kissed him. Soft, deliberate, a choice rather than an impulse. When she pulled back, Keaton's eyes were wet. "What was that for?" he asked. "For showing up, at the hospital, at the board meeting. Here." She touched his face gently. "For being someone worth taking a chance on." He took her hand and held it. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you right," he said. "Good, because I'm going to hold you to that." Outside the window, the winter sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and gold. Inside the small apartment, a family that had almost never existed was slowly, carefully learning how to become real. 4 months later, spring had arrived in the city. The trees along the street outside Kendra's apartment building were starting to bud, their branches tipped with pale green. The air smelled like rain and possibility. And inside the offices of Vale Enterprises, something had changed. Kendra walked through the halls of the Employee and Community Wellness Initiative, a department that hadn't existed 6 months ago and now occupied an entire floor of the building. She had an office with a window, a team of 3 people who reported to her, and a budget that would have seemed like a fantasy a year ago. Talia Singh met her in the hallway, a tablet in her hand and a smile on her face. "We just got the numbers from last quarter," Talia said. "Employee turnover is down 18% since we implemented the new policies. The Hardship Fund has helped 47 families stay afloat during emergencies. And the flexible scheduling program for caregivers has a 92% satisfaction rate. That's incredible. It's just the beginning." Lauren Price is still complaining about costs, but even she has to admit that the numbers are moving in the right direction. They walked together toward the conference room where their weekly meeting was held. Along the way, they passed a bulletin board covered with thank you notes from employees who had benefited from the new programs. Stories of crisis averted, of families kept together, of people who had been seen as disposable finally being treated as valuable. Kendra paused at one note in particular. It was from Reina Lopez, the woman who had hugged her on the day she'd been laid off, who had told her not to blame herself. "Thank you for fighting for us. I never thought a company this big would actually care about people like me. The emergency childcare grant saved my family. I don't know how to repay that except to work harder and be there for someone else when they need it." Kendra touched the note lightly, remembering how alone she had felt that December afternoon. Walking out of the building with a cardboard box in her arms and no idea what was going to happen next, she wasn't alone anymore. At home, things were different too. Keaton showed up every other evening to help with Aria, learning the rhythms of parenthood that he had missed in the first months of his daughter's life. Diaper changes and feeding schedules, bath time and bedtime stories. The art of getting a 6-month-old to sleep when she was determined to stay awake. He wasn't perfect at it. He made mistakes, gave her the wrong bottle once, put her diaper on backwards, forgot to bring extra clothes when they went out, and she had an explosion of epic proportions. But he kept showing up, keep trying, keep learning. And slowly, day by day, Kendra began to trust him. They weren't some fairy tale couple without problems. They argued about schedules and disagreed about parenting philosophies and had awkward conversations about their complicated past. They saw a counselor together, learning how to communicate without falling back into old patterns. But they showed up, both of them, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Keaton's leadership had changed too. He spent less time in his corner office and more time walking the floors of the company, talking to employees and listening to their concerns. The people who worked for him were no longer names on spreadsheets. They were people with stories, with families, with lives that could be destroyed or saved depending on the decisions he made. He thought about that now every time he signed something. Every time he approved a budget or a restructuring plan, he thought about the cardboard boxes and the scared faces and the children who might not have Christmas presents if he made the wrong choice. It made him slower, be more careful, less efficient by some measures. It also made him better. One evening in April, Keaton arrived at Kendra's apartment to find her sitting on the couch with Aria in her arms, watching the sunset through the window. The baby was asleep, Her tiny hand curled around Kendra's finger, her breathing soft and even. He sat down beside them, not saying anything, just being present. After a while, Kendra spoke. "I thought losing that job was the end of everything," she said quietly. "That day in December, when I walked out of the building with that box, I felt like my whole life was falling apart, like I had failed at everything, at work, at relationships, at being a mother. I didn't know how I was going to survive." Keaton put his arm around her, drawing her close. "And now?" he asked. She looked at him, at their daughters, at the life they were building together, imperfect and fragile and worth fighting for. "Now I think it was just the beginning." Marisol Vale's house was warm and welcoming, filled with the smell of cooking food and the sound of laughter. It was a Sunday afternoon in late spring, and the whole family had gathered for dinner. Keaton and Kendra and Aria. Milo Reyes, who had become something like a grandfather to the baby, and was currently making ridiculous faces to try to get her to laugh. Talia Singh, who had been invited because Kendra insisted, and who was, now deep in conversation with Marisol about the best way to make rice. Aria was 7 months old now, sitting up on her own, grabbing at everything, within reach, making sounds that were starting to resemble words. She had Keaton's eyes and Kendra's determination, and a personality that was entirely her own. Keaton watched his mother hold his daughter, saw the joy in her eyes that she'd been waiting years to feel. "You did good, mijo," Marisol said quietly, when the others were distracted. "I was worried about you for a long time. You were so focused on building your empire that you forgot to build a life. But look at you now." "I'm still figuring it out," Keaton admitted. "That's what life is, figuring it out as you go." She bounced Aria gently. "But you have people who love you now. People worth slowing down for. Don't forget that." "I won't." Across the room, Kendra caught his eye and smiled. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be more challenges ahead, more disagreements, more moments when the old patterns tried to reassert themselves. Building something real was never easy, and sustaining it was even harder. But they had made a choice, both of them, to show up, to try, to become the people they wanted to be instead of the people they had been. That was enough. That was everything. Later that evening, after the dinner was finished and the dishes were washed and Aria had been put to bed in a portable crib, in Marisol's living room, Keaton and Kendra sat together on the porch, watching the stars come out. "I've been thinking," Kendra said. "About what?" "About what I want to teach her, when she's old enough to understand." She looked up at the sky, her expression thoughtful. "I want her to know that her value isn't determined by her job, or her salary, or what other people think of her. I want her to know that asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. I want her to know that people can change, really change, if they're willing to do the work." Keaton took her hand. "What else?" "I want her to know that forgiveness isn't something you owe to people who hurt you. It's a choice you make when they've earned it through actions, not just words. And I want her to know that second chances are precious. They're not guaranteed. They have to be deserved." She turned to look at him. "You deserved yours. I want you to know that—" Keaton's throat felt tight. "I'm still working on deserving it every day." "I know. That's why I trust you." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable with each other in a way that had taken months to build. Inside the house, Aria made a small sound in her sleep, the sound of a baby who was safe and loved and surrounded by people who would fight for her. Kendra leaned her head against Keaton's shoulder. "Merry late Christmas," she said. He smiled, remembering a cold December evening that felt like a lifetime ago. "Merry late Christmas, Kendra." Above them, the stars kept shining, indifferent to the small dramas of human life. But down here, in this ordinary house in this ordinary neighborhood, something extraordinary had happened. A family had been born. And that, in the end, was worth more than any empire.